I got home late last night, the kind of late where all the good parking spots were already taken. My complex wasn't huge, but it was big enough that parking at the far end meant a decent walk back to my building. It was one of those nights where the air felt alive. A thunderstorm was rolling in. The wind hummed with electricity, and the scent of rain lingered, sharp and clean. It felt good, almost refreshing after a long day. I wasn't in a rush. Instead of heading straight to my door, I decided to take the long way, a loop around the back of the building. The night felt too good to waste, and honestly, I liked the quiet. As I rounded the last corner and started heading toward my apartment, I noticed someone. A man stepped out from between two parked cars. He wasn't too close, but close enough that I could see him clearly. We made eye contact, and he gave me a quick nod, the kind strangers give when acknowledging each other without any real intention behind it. I nodded back, out of habit. I slowed my pace. He started walking too, ahead of me, but something was off. His pace matched mine, step for step. It wasn't natural. I slowed down even more, and so did he. My heart started to beat faster. This wasn't coincidence. The corner to my building was coming up, and my front door was right there. I figured I'd cut the corner, slip inside quickly, and lock the door before he got too close. But he didn't want to walk too far ahead. He lingered, like he was waiting for me to catch up. My skin crawled. He reached the corner first. I rounded it a second later, and my stomach dropped. He was standing at my door, hand on the knob, rattling it. He looked up at me, perfectly calm, and said, "I lost my keys." The lie hit me like a brick to the chest. This wasn't a mistake. He didn't live there. He was waiting for me. Every instinct I had screamed at me to keep moving. I forced a smile, the kind you give a stranger to avoid making things awkward, and walked past him like nothing was wrong. My legs felt stiff, my body tight with panic. His eyes followed me, unwavering. Then he spoke again. "Hey, do you have a phone I can borrow?" I didn't stop walking. I couldn't. My mind raced through the options. My car was too far, the parking lot was dark and empty, and my apartment was blocked by him. If I tried to get inside, I knew he'd follow me in. My throat felt dry. My voice shook when I said, "Sorry, my phone died." The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. My heart skipped a beat. Now he thought I couldn't call for help. His head tilted slightly, like he was processing that. I could feel his stare burning into my back as I walked to the next apartment over, my neighbor's place. I didn't know him well, just enough for polite small talk when we crossed paths. Didn't matter. I knocked hard. The man didn't move. He stood at my door, watching me, waiting. The seconds dragged on. Each one felt heavier than the last. My mind screamed, "Open the door. Please, just open the door." Finally, after what felt like forever, the lock clicked. The door opened a crack. My neighbor, Kevin, squinted at me, confused and half asleep. I didn't give him a chance to ask what was going on. "Hey, Kevin," I blurted out, pretending we were old friends. Then I shoved past him into his apartment, pushing the door closed behind me and locking it. Kevin stared at me, bewildered. What the hell's going on? I was breathing hard, trying to stay calm. My voice came out in a rush. "There's a guy at my door. He was pretending he lives there. He followed me." Kevin's face darkened. Without a word, he disappeared into his bedroom. I heard the unmistakable sound of a gun safe opening. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called 911. The dispatcher answered. I barely got the words out. By the time the cops arrived, the man was gone. They searched the complex, checked the parking lot. Nothing. The officers were sympathetic, but they didn't have much to go on. No cameras in the lot. No witnesses. One of the cops walked me back to my door, waited while I checked every room, every closet, under the bed, even though I knew the guy wasn't inside. Still, my hands didn't stop shaking until the door was locked behind me again. I didn't sleep that night. And now? Now I can't walk to my car after dark without feeling eyes on me. I still take the long way around the building sometimes. Not because I enjoy the air anymore, but because I need to make sure no one else is taking the long way too. Friday nights were something special when I was 11. My parents would head out to dinner, leaving me and my brothers at home with pizza and a couple of rented movies. My older brother, who was 16, was technically in charge, though that usually didn't last long. Most nights, he'd slip off to his friend's place down the street, leaving me in charge. I loved it. I liked bossing my younger brothers around, and more importantly, I got to pick the movies. That particular Friday night, a storm was rolling in. The rain had been coming and going all evening, the sky occasionally flashing with distant lightning. Our house sat at the edge of a park, and on one side, we didn't have any neighbors, just an open stretch of grass, trees, and a footpath that curved through it. People would pass by sometimes, walking their dogs or jogging under the dim streetlights. It was quiet, peaceful in a way. Our carport was huge, big enough for 4 cars, and with Mom and Dad gone, it became a playground for my younger brothers. They raced around on bikes and skateboards, their laughter bouncing off the concrete walls. I stayed inside, curled up on the couch with a blanket and a movie, half listening to the storm rumbling outside. About halfway through the second movie, my brothers burst into the room. They weren't laughing anymore. "There's a man watching us from the park," one of them blurted out. I barely glanced at them. "Yeah, right," I said, not looking away from the TV. "No, really." The younger one's voice was higher than usual, tight with fear. "He's by the fence. He's just standing there." I sighed and paused the movie, fully prepared to call their bluff. But when I looked at their faces, wide eyes, pale skin, I felt a cold prickling at the back of my neck. They weren't kidding. "Okay," I said slowly. "Let's go look." We tiptoed back to the carport, huddling in the doorway. I squinted into the darkness. The park looked empty. Trees swayed in the wind. The streetlights flickered, but there was no one there. I was about to tell them they were imagining things when lightning split the sky. For half a second, everything lit up, and that's when I saw him. He wasn't in the park anymore. He was standing in our yard, just a few feet from the fence, staring right at us. We screamed. I slammed the door shut, the sound echoing through the house. My heart hammered so hard it felt like it might burst out of my chest. "Lock the doors," I shouted. We ran through the house, bolting every door and window. My hands were shaking so badly I fumbled with the locks. The rain picked up, hammering against the windows like fingers tapping to get in. We ended up in my parents' room. I grabbed their phone, the kind with a long cord, and dragged it into the bathroom, locking that door too. My brothers huddled together in the bathtub, their eyes wide and scared. I called my brother's friend's house. His friend answered, and I blurted everything out in one breath. "There's a man in our yard." The kid yelled for my brother, and I heard muffled voices in the background. "We're coming," he said. I barely had time to hang up before my mind started racing again. The bathroom felt too small, too quiet. Every sound outside made me flinch. I imagined the man trying the doors, peering through windows, creeping closer. Was he already inside? Was he waiting somewhere, hiding in the shadows? It felt like hours, but it was maybe 5 minutes before I heard voices outside. My brother and his friends were shouting for us. I peeked out the window. They weren't alone. His friends' parents were with them, and they were calling the police. By the time the cops arrived, the man was gone. A second police car drove up through the park, shining lights into the trees. The officers searched our yard, the park, even inside the house. Nothing. The rain washed everything clean, like he was never there. I wanted to believe that meant we were safe, especially now that my brother was back. He wasn't scared of anything, and when he was around, I felt safe too. Our parents came home to a nightmare. Police cars in the driveway, neighbors gathered outside, and us wrapped in blankets, still shaking. I'll never forget the look on their faces when they pulled in and saw the lights. The police never found him, and eventually, life moved on. Years later, after I'd grown up and moved out, my dad told me something that still haunts me. One night, not long after I left, my youngest brother woke them up. Dad said he looked white as a ghost. His voice trembled as he spoke. He said he woke up to a voice, a man's voice, whispering at his window. "Hey boy, are your parents home?" My parents never told us. They didn't want to scare us. But after that, they replaced the old fly screen with glass louvers and metal bars. I still think about that night sometimes, about the man in the yard, and I wonder if he ever really left. The summer of '92, or maybe '93, sticks in my mind like it happened yesterday. I was a preteen, living in a rural pocket of Tennessee where the hills rolled forever and the smell of honeysuckle clung to the air. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and if you didn't wave to a passing car, you'd probably get a call asking what your problem was. But for all its charm, our little corner of Tennessee had a darker side. People dumped their trash wherever they pleased. Old fridges, Broken furniture, bags of rotting junk, all hurled down hillsides like the land was their personal garbage can. Illegal dump sites were just part of the landscape back then, scattered through the woods like scars no one cared to fix. That summer, though, the trash wasn't what people were talking about. A woman had been found dead. She was discovered at the bottom of a steep, trash-filled ravine off a narrow dirt road called Bone Road, a name that already felt wrong before anyone found a corpse there. No one knew her. She wasn't from around here and hadn't been reported missing. The rumor mill ran wild. Some said it was a drifter. Others whispered about a satanic cult, which people loved to blame back then. But no one knew for sure. The sheriff sure didn't. Whoever killed her was still out there. My mom was my best friend, goofy, tough, and the kind of person everyone loved. She taught at the local elementary school and had a way of making you feel safe even when she was scolding you. My dad, a pharmacist, was smart and kind, always willing to fill a forgotten prescription, even in the middle of the night. It was just me and Mom that day. We'd spent the afternoon at a family reunion by the lake, but a sudden thunderstorm cut the picnic short. On the drive home, the idea hit us. We should find Bone Road. We weren't just curious. No, we were investigating. Like Sherlock Holmes and Watson, only with a beat-up station wagon instead of a horse-drawn carriage. Dad was at work, my brother was off with his friends, and this was before GPS. All we had was a detailed county map Dad kept for school board meetings. We spread it out on the kitchen table like explorers planning a quest. Bone Road wasn't easy to find. A thin, crooked line near the edge of the map, but we found it. We piled into the car and took off, laughing about how brilliant we were. The road started paved, then turned to gravel, then dirt. The storm left everything drenched and steamy. Mist clung to the ground, rising from the asphalt like ghostly smoke. The trees lining the road seemed taller, darker. The farther we drove, the quieter it got. No birds, no crickets, just the hum of our tires on wet gravel. I didn't like it. Mom must have felt it too because she stopped joking. We hit a blind curve, and the second we rounded it, my stomach dropped. A rusted pickup truck was parked by the dump site. Beside it stood a man. He looked like he belonged to the truck. Filthy jeans, greasy hair, a shirt so stained I couldn't tell what color it had been. He wasn't a cop. We knew all the local officers, and this guy wasn't one of them. Mom slowed the car, just enough to edge around his truck. He was on my side, close enough that I could see his face. He grinned at me. He only had 2 teeth. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile a coyote might give a rabbit right before it pounces. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked up. Mom didn't say a word. She pressed the gas, and we didn't look back. Bone Road was a dead end. When we reached the field at the end of the road, Mom whispered the exact thing I'd been thinking. Oh damn, we had to turn around. She tried to sound reassuring. I bet he's gone by now. He wasn't. He was still there, standing by his truck, still grinning. It was worse this time. He wasn't just smiling, he was waiting, like he knew we'd be coming back. He didn't move as we drove past, just watched. I didn't breathe until the station wagon hit pavement again. Dad lost his mind when he found out what we'd done, called it the dumbest thing we'd ever done. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. But a few days later, the paper ran a story. They caught the guy. The woman had been trying to escape her abusive ex-boyfriend. She moved here to disappear, but he found her. He ended her life, drove around with her remains in his truck, and left her on Bone Road like discarded trash. The paper ran his mugshot. It was him. 2 teeth. Same grin. Mom and I never told Dad that part. We figured he didn't need another reason to think we were idiots. The man got life without parole. Mom and I still go on adventures, but we stick to places with cell service and witnesses. And Bone Road, we never went back. Thanks for joining me on this journey through the strange and unexpected. If you enjoyed the story, hit that like button, share with fellow curious minds, and don't forget to subscribe for more. Until next time, stay curious, stay intrigued,